Sabah al-Khair, good morning dear listeners. You're listening to Radio 3CR on 855 AM and Palestine Remembered with Robert Martin, Nasser Mashni and Yusuf Ahmed al-Rimawi.
Palestine Remembered is Australia's only English language radio program that is totally dedicated to Palestine. We'd like to welcome those listening on 855 and those that will join us on podcast at 3cr.org.au.
Thanks for joining us. Stay with us and enjoy the episode.
Good morning, Rob. How are you doing?
Mate, I'm well, Nasser. How are you? Good morning, listeners. How have you been, Nasser?
I'm good. Stage 4 lockdown in Melbourne, but as bad as stage 4 is, we're doing so much better than Lebanon. And obviously, our hearts and thoughts and prayers go out to the Lebanese following the devastation of this week's explosion.
And we should say accident. We're going with accident. I think most of the world's going with accident.
Yeah.
Other than your mate Donald Trump.
Well, yeah, Donald Trump went out there a bit earlier. Yeah. Look, the evidence suggests that it's an accident. I mean, that being said, whilst the overlords that control Lebanon have raped Lebanon for so long, how they can allow 3,000 tons of that ammonium nitrate to just be stored there for something like 5 or 6 years now is just beggars belief.
There's been warnings, isn't there?
Look, and the reason we should really throw our hearts to Lebanon is because Lebanon has been abandoned by the rest of the world. Not only is it a small country, 1 in 4 people in Lebanon is a refugee. A chunk of those are Palestinians, but most of them are Syrian. They can't go back to Syria today. The Palestinians, as we know, denied their right of return to go back to their homes in Palestine. But time and time again, Lebanon, a small country, 1 in 4 people is a refugee in Lebanon.
I did not know that.
Yeah, the world has forsaken Lebanon for so long. It's not enough that a small little country has to deal with 25% of its population being refugees. It has to suffer the indignity and disaster of repeated Israeli incursions, whether it's been the meddling in the Civil War, 1982, 2004 and 6. I mean, really despicably. And I'm cynical here, the reality of Israel offering aid. And one of the things that they said, they went, we'll send you aid, but we want to make sure you can't change the packaging. We want the aid to go there with Hebrew writing on it.
Oh, wow. Complete stunt. Because they were bombing Lebanon.
The aeroplanes fly over Lebanese airspace all the time. The offer of humanitarian aid from a country that's killed and injured as many Lebanese and Palestinian refugees in Lebanon and regularly threatens to destroy more infrastructure. I mean, it just makes you sick.
It is disgusting.
One of the things I read recently was in 2006, Israel fired more than 1 million cluster munitions into that tiny country. Cluster bombs are illegal under international law. And there was a few tweets. And this is the sickness. The Ministry of Defense in Israel sent out a tweet under the directive of Defense Ministry Benny Gantz and Foreign Minister Gabi Ashkenazi. The state of Israel has offered medical humanitarian assistance to Lebanon through the international defense and political officials. And Yair Lapid, this guy, was running for prime minister and really a terrible human. I send my deepest condolences to the residents of Beirut during the difficult time and wish a speedy recovery to all. When the Tel Aviv town hall lit themselves up with a Lebanese flag as if, your hearts and minds are with us. I mean, it's sickening and beggars belief.
I've got no words to that, Nathan. I have no words to what the... I know their actions horrific on a daily basis, but it just keeps getting worse.
We know the Israelis greenwash, they pinkwash. This is aid washing, where they're saying we're going to use aid to wash the crimes of apartheid and what they've done to the Palestinians and a big chunk of the Arab world. There are extremists beyond the pale in the Knesset in Israel. One of them, a Likudnik, a member of the same party as Benjamin Netanyahu, who was feted by our Prime Minister in Australia because we're the same countries, we've got so much in common. This guy, Moshe Feinstein, he celebrated the explosion on Wednesday and saying that it was received in honor of Tu B'Av, which is the holiday of love that began on Tuesday evening. And he said in his tweet, you don't really believe that this was some messy gas warehouse, yeah? Do you understand that this hell was supposed to fall on us as a rain of missiles? This is what he wrote in a Facebook post, excuse me.
They've got to tweak it, twist it, don't they?
Oh, and he says, today is a day of joy and a true and huge thank you to God and all the geniuses and heroes, really, who organized this wonderful celebration in honor of the Day of Love. I mean, that's just sickening Zionism at its worst.
Writing a tweet like that in Australia of what would happen. I think the federal police would be over there.
Imagine anyone anywhere else in the world. Only Israeli members of Knesset can get away with this sort of vile shit. Anyway, the good news is, mate, we're joined by a great guest. So, Rob, we're joined by a great guest today.
We are by Ronnie Barkan, who I have spent some time with in Jerusalem, so I know him reasonably well. He's a Jewish Israeli activist and maths teacher. He grew up near Tel Aviv and he's co-founder of Boycott from Within. Ronnie also describes the Israeli treatment of Palestinians as apartheid, identifies himself as an anti-Zionist, and refers to Israel as the Jewish supremacist entity, founded on the basis of ethnic cleansing and ethnic segregation. So he has some pretty strong opinions now, sir.
He's a good guy.
Hi, Ronnie. Ronnie, one of the first questions we ask to all our guests is their Palestine story. And I know you live in what you call Palestine because you're an Israeli Jew. How did you come into the position that you hold today? Because it's very rare to have Israelis to hold such opinions of yourself.
So hi, Nasser and Robert. First of all, I grew up like any other Israeli, being indoctrinated in one way or another. And the indoctrination is very important. I mean, there is a whole mechanism of raising children to be soldiers, basically, and to be blindly supporting the state of Israel, etc. This is how you find yourself as an Israeli, or many Israelis find themselves acting as sort of so-called ambassadors for Israel whenever they go outside. They really care about promoting that Zionist project. It is really part of their identity, I would say, in a way. So like others, I also grew up being indoctrinated in one way or another, but I think that it was only acting as some sort of a thin veil of ignorance, which was, I am happy to say that I was quite lucky to overcome that quite easily compared to maybe other stories that we may hear. And for me, what happened is that for about 6 years, I was contemplating the idea of whether I'm willing to serve in the army or not, in the Israeli, so-called Israel Defense Forces, or Israel Terror Forces, to be more precise. And even though I was never too much of a nationalist, too much of a Zionist, still we're being taught that if you don't serve in the army, you are some sort of you're regarded some sort of a parasite or a traitor. And obviously I didn't want to be like that. So I did end up, even though I had my reservations about that, I did end up getting drafted with actually thinking that I could get out of the army at any time I wanted for health reasons. So I said, okay, I'll give it a chance and let's see. And indeed, after a couple of months, 2 months exactly, I had this realization, this kind of insight. And I realized that basically, first and foremost, I'm a human being, more than anything else, more than being an Israeli or anything else. And from that moment on, first of all, I mean, the realization was immediate that I'm no longer a soldier from that moment on. And from that moment on, I'm just a human being. I'm a human being, and that's it. I mean, and now that it's their story. I mean, I'm no longer a soldier, and they can do with it whatever they want. Funnily enough, a week before that, I had another sort of a eureka moment, which was there was another thing that I was contemplating for a long time, and that was becoming vegetarian. These days, I'm vegan. And I had this other realization that I have a choice in the matter, whether to eat this piece of cow or not, etc. And again, I had this understanding that okay, it is the thing that I feel most wholesome about is not to eat this animal. So for me, these two are related, coming out of some sort of a brainwashing about being a carnivore, and then a week later coming out of this brainwashing about being part of the Israeli army. And from that moment on, the rest was very easy, actually. It was a very liberating experience. And from that moment on, the most natural, no-brainer, obvious thing to do is to support those people who are oppressed and subjugated, especially when I am, by law, the privileged person in that position, where the state does everything to benefit people like myself at the expense of all the others.
Now, Ronnie, we want to talk about your case, the Humboldt 3. This is a fantastic segue, though, to go straight to Peter Beinart. As you know, he's written a 7,000-word piece in the Jerusalem Chronicle, Jewish Chronicle, excuse me. Last week we had Professor Dr. Peter Slezak discussing it. What are your thoughts on Peter Beinart?
Yeah, Peter Beinart has dedicated his life to being an apologist for Israel, to spouting Zionist propaganda left and right. Now, he's regarded as a leftist. He promotes the liberal Zionist form of Zionist propaganda, which is the most dangerous of them all. The only two types of Zionists that I know are the right-wing Zionists, or what I call the honest Zionists, those who are racist and proud of it, those who say, yes, there was an ethnic cleansing, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. The problem is that we haven't finished the job. Yeah. There are still some Palestinians left in Palestine. And then this is also the acting government in Israel. The other form of Zionism, the other discourse that we hear that is much more dangerous, is that which lends some sort of legitimacy and a liberal cover to this race state of Israel that is a supremacist, apartheid, colonialist entity from the get-go, from its very foundation. And I will, to put it in short, in one line, basically the only way for Israel to become a legitimate entity is if it respects the rights of all the sons and daughters of the land, or all 20 million people of that land, where currently it is built for one and only one type of people at the expense of all the others, as I mentioned before. Now, Beinart, I appreciate that he is transitioning, that he is, undergoing this life crisis and trying to, he's in a dilemma because he is trying to be liberal and Zionist at the same time, but it doesn't work. This is an oxymoron, a liberal supremacist. Yeah. But he's still not there. He still hasn't left one bank of the river and basically taken the leap of faith to the other. So he hasn't still transitioned from Zionism into humanism. And that is, some people think that this is a gradual process. I tend to think that, like I mentioned before, that I had some sort of a realization about myself, and that led me to obviously taking stand on the right side. And also for Beinart, I expect that moment where he will have to let go of his very strong hold onto Zionism, and then realize, and then he will be liberated, and then he will become an ally, but not a moment before that. What the discourse that he's promoting today is still just as dangerous as it was basically 10 years ago, because he still goes above and beyond to lend legitimacy to something that is inherently illegitimate, supremacist, and so on. Now, I can go on and on about it, but I will just give you a few examples. First of all, he conflates over and over again between Zionism and Judaism, between criminal supremacist Zionism, which is an ultra-nationalistic supremacist ideology in practice, and Judaism, which is a religion of thousands of years. Zionism is no more than 100 and some years old, and it is inherently opposed to everything the Jewish values and Judaism stands for. Now, by conflating the two, he again lends legitimacy to this criminal project, the Zionist project in Palestine, and he also kind of diverts the attention from the main issues because he tries to, he gives it cover, another type of cover. Another thing that this type of discourse is why is it so dangerous? Because it promotes ideas like Israel and Palestine, as if these are two separate entities, where in fact Israel and Palestine are the exact same spot of land. One is very literally built on top of the other and at the expense of its indigenous people. Whenever the liberal Zionists speak about Israel a democracy, that is laughable. There is not an iota of democracy in Israel-Palestine. It is based on everything that is opposed to democratic values, everything that is opposed to equality, the rights of minorities, multiculturalism, and so on. Whenever they call it a Jewish state, it's not a Jewish state, it's a Zionist state. Whenever, and on and on, whenever they speak about 50 years, ending of the 50 years of occupation, no, that's just a minor, that's just the symptom of it all, the 50 years of occupation. What we are dealing with, and the real issue, is not the 50 years of occupation, but the 70 years of occupation and colonialism and apartheid and ethnic cleansing. That's what we have to be discussing.
Absolutely. Decolonization is the conversation.
Exactly.
Ronnie, now on June the 20th in 2017, you and two other activists, Stivit Sinai and Majid Abu Salama, you got together and you protested a visiting official from the Knesset from Israel, Eliza Lavie. And you were protesting, obviously, her husband, and it was an event hosted by Humboldt University. Now, I've seen the footage, and this you're just peacefully protesting. I mean, you were manhandled, all of you were manhandled, yet the three of you were charged. And ultimately, you were in court. The final court date was during the week. Tell us about that process and maybe why Berlin and Germany are so crazily hostile to Palestinian rights, why you could get charged for such a thing.
Yes, in 2017, we were protesting against Eliza Lavie, who was a member of Knesset from the Yesh Atid party. By the way, that party, on his website still, you will find part of its party platform is actually opposing BDS, and they have these brochures, like these booklets, how to counter the lies of the BDS, as they call it. And that's what she did. She came on an explicit mission with other people from her party to counter the BDS struggle and to come up with her. She went on a proper hasbara mission, a proper propaganda mission on behalf of Israel and her party, obviously with in coordination with the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs, etc. So we went there to disrupt and to tell her what we think about her actions. Now, it is important to note that she didn't only come on a propaganda mission. Her role was in the Knesset at the time. She was also the head of the anti-BDS lobby in the Knesset, in the Israeli parliament, apartheid parliament. She was also acting as a member of the Defense and Security of the Defense Committee in 2014, which oversaw the massacre in Gaza, the massacre of over 550 children, and the liquidation of 89 entire families. Yeah. And later on, she also acted as the head of the Israeli mission to the European Council in Strasbourg, where basically among her actions, she was defending the mass incarceration and torture of Palestinian minors, and also the shooting of live ammunition against the unarmed demonstrators across the fence of the Gaza ghetto. So this is the person we were demonstrating against. So after a few minutes that she was speaking, I stood up holding the excellent UN report on Israeli apartheid by Attila and Falk in my hand. And I told her that she was not a legitimate representative. She was a representative of a criminal apartheid state. I quoted from that report. I explained what apartheid is all about. I explained what BDS is all about. As I left the room at some point, I also handed her the report and asked her to read it. Later on, my fellow activist, another Israeli dissident, Dr. Stavit Sinai, she stood up and she actually talked or shouted in Hebrew at Lavie, telling her that she has the blood of the children of Gaza on her hands. She was handled in a quite roughly handled. I mean, she was surrounded by people. She tried to get away from their hold, or they were holding her arm and so on. So it seems like there was a bit of a commotion there. And on the way out, apparently, I mean, this was her version all along, but we never had proof for that until recently. She was also punched in the face by the organizers, by one of the organizers. And then, as she was outside, she was kind of banging on the door, trying to come back in to get the information, the details of that person who assaulted her. Finally, Majid Abu Salama from Gaza, an activist from Gaza, we're all based in Berlin these days. He was sitting throughout this lecture. During the Q&A session, he was asking a question, given the right to speak. He was asking a long question and eventually left of his own accord as they were trying to convince him to stay in the room, and he left at some point. All three of us for that, whatever I just described now, and it's all on video, were taken to court. We're charged with trespassing and assault, even though this was a public event, so it's not clear how it was trespassing. And the only person who was actually assaulted was Stavit Sinai, who was punched in the face. That's the story. Now, the trial started last year, 2019. We had a couple of hearings. Eventually, there was no verdict because of some bureaucratic issues in Germany, when basically the judge could not arrive at a verdict. We also asked to bring in our witnesses, including Professor Falk, to give testimony about his excellent report about Israeli apartheid. Both Tilly and Falk have endorsed us, the three activists, etc. And eventually there was no verdict, and everything started over just early this week. And we had a hearing in the court, and basically there is a verdict now. The verdict is in. Two of the three, Majid and myself, were acquitted, and Stavit, because she was also charged with assault. Eventually, the prosecution tried everything in its power, and they changed versions so many times. And the judge, throughout the hearing, he tried to get the prosecution off their high horse, asking them just to drop the case. And every time the prosecutor had to go outside to make a phone call to her superiors, and they told her that she must carry on with this trial no matter what. I'm putting it in my words. I don't know what exactly was said, but basically. And eventually, the judge kind of ended acknowledging, and we even had proof that Stavit was actually the one who was assaulted. He ended up acknowledging that there was no attempt for assault on her part. There was no one who was actually hurt, but she may have acted in a reckless way in some way when she was banging on the door, and therefore he gave her the most minimal fine he could give, but he didn't acquit her completely. And that is the end of that trial. So yeah, it was clearly a victory on our part. The prosecution.
Well, you should have got medals, not charged.
Thank you. You know, sorry to jump in. Actually, it is funny that exactly a week before the trial of 2019, we were awarded the Copenhagen Courage Award by the co-mayor of Copenhagen, Denmark. And then the week later, for this same action, for this action that I was talking about, and the week later, the trial started here in Berlin. So this kind of, you can juxtapose these two things.
Amazing. Now, you talked about, the reality of the prosecutor going out and getting instructions from her controller. I understand that Yair Lapid, he ran for prime minister. He sent a letter to the Berlin mayor, really putting the heat on. Your lawyer said, well, in the first instance, the prosecutor agreed that those charges in a normal circumstance would be dropped. That for people who've got no prior convictions and such low value charges, they would be dropped, but not when it's political. Your lawyer, Matthias, said, well, we weren't the ones making it political. You didn't. And then the prosecutor replied, of course it's a political process.
Exactly. Exactly. And this was during the 2019 hearings, and we were able to show, first of all, the Zionist witnesses were lying, and because we had some proof, some videos actually that were recorded by the Zionist delegation that contradicted everything that they were saying. But other than that, also the prosecutor admitted that this was a political trial. We also know that there were also suggestions to drop the case, within this 1 year gap between, the previous trial and this trial that just ended. And the prosecution basically was adamant on going on with that. But anyhow, and so one thing is that we showed that this was political. The other thing that was interesting is that the prosecutor accused us of opening a tribunal against Israel. And we used that phrase that she kind of was accusing us of to say, yes, actually, we happen to agree with the prosecution. This is exactly what we are doing.
We want to put Israel on trial.
Along with us to court.
Yeah.
And we have opened a tribunal against Israel. And what we did, and I will be sending you the video later, obviously, we had a sort of a support vigil outside of the court, which started before the trial last Monday. And we literally said, okay, we are now opening a tribunal against Israel, and we invite anyone who has anything on their heart, who want to express whatever is on their heart, or who has concrete accusations against the criminal state of Israel, to come to the microphone and accuse Israel of whatever it is, 7 decades of ethnic cleansing and apartheid, and dropping a 1-ton bomb on Gaza, and on and on. And this is what we did. So along with the drumming and the music, etc., we were also accusing Israel over and over again of different crimes, and there were people coming in from across Europe to join us in solidarity, and this was really wonderful and heartwarming. And in Stavit's statement to the court, she quoted from the signs that we were holding outside with the figures of Nelson Mandela and Razan al-Najjar from the medic in Gaza who was killed
Executed.
by the Israelis. Yes,
Yep.
and there was another picture of Sophie Scholl, who was from the White Rose, the anti-Nazi activists in Munich at the time. And the caption for these pictures was "History will be the judge," and that was the theme of it all. That history will be the judge. We are not that concerned about the verdict. We are much more concerned about being on the right side of history.
By the right side of history. Just a last question, Ronnie. I mean, we had the situation where Yair Lapid is interfering in a trial in another country. We've got the same situation now. Seth Rogen, was on he did a podcast and he said, Israel's a crazy invention, etc. His mum then gets a call from Isaac Herzog, used to lead the Labour Party, forcing his mum to tell him to call Isaac so he can apologise. I mean, what's going on?
Serious? Are you being serious? Are you messing me with this?
No, 100%.
It's just so outrageous. Yeah.
Ronnie, what are your thoughts on Isaac Herzog calling Seth's mum in Canada?
Yeah, I mean, it is funny more than anything, and unfortunately, it is not surprising because first of all, about our trial, there was we know that Yair Lapid, who was also he was a candidate for prime minister not long ago. He was he was in touch with the mayor of Berlin, who accused us specifically and BDS as a group of anti-Semitism. There was the Eliza Levi, who was the member of Knesset that we were demonstrating against. She was in touch with the Humboldt University, and she was convincing them. And there was correspondence between them, and both her and the head of the university were kind of putting out some statement that yes, indeed, we need to follow up on this, basically to file charges, etc. I mean, so there was definitely a political motivation here coming from the Zionist lobby, let's say, okay, the Israeli part and whoever is here acting on behalf of the state of Israel. And with Seth Rogen, I think that, first of all, I mean, it would be laughable. Like, Robert's response was absolutely in place. It is laughable that the mother of Seth Rogen receives some phone call, etc. But unfortunately, this is how it operates. And I think it can only operate in that manner because people are just are told to be to be cautious, to fear and guilt are really debilitating factors, and this is what Israel uses over and over again, especially here in Germany, of course. And I argue that taking responsibility as opposed to being motivated out of fear and guilt, this is sort of a driving force. This is an enabling force. So I'm not motivated I don't feel guilty for being born in Israel. I don't feel guilty for being, by law, having the status of a privileged Israeli Jew. It's not because I regard myself as Israeli or Jewish, but this is my legal status under Israeli apartheid. But acknowledging that, it means that I carry more responsibility, and this is a driving force. This drives me to act and to abolish that system that is about that system of oppression, basically. So I would argue that I would urge anyone in that position, yes, to let go of that guilt that is being pampered, especially here in Germany of all places, and I would urge them, drive them into action, and by taking responsibility rather than being motivated by this guilt factor.
Well, Ronnie, we've got about a minute and a bit left. If you can talk to me, why is Germany so, I mean, aside from the guilt for the Holocaust, and they should be guilty, but they're so pro-Israel, and Berlin in particular?
There's two reasons for that, but the easy answer, because we don't have much time, is that blindly supporting Israel, no matter what, is a quick fix for German society. It is a way for them not to look at themselves in the mirror and not to deal with their own supremacy and racism. And I would argue very clearly, and I would say very, I know that this is a strong message, but I say that by blindly supporting the state of Israel, they have learned absolutely nothing from their horrid past. And the only way to overcome that past is to realize how wrong they are in blindly supporting the criminal state of Israel, which is a race state that separates between what it regards as the Übermenschen and Untermenschen.
Wow, what a fantastic way to end. Ronnie Barkan, thank you so very much, my brother. All power to you, and good luck on your next adventure. And inshallah, we will have coffee again, you, Robert, and I, in Jerusalem soon.
Absolutely.
That'll be fantastic.
And some shisha.
We'll be waiting for that.